So, in keeping with my current trend of wanting to get off my rear end more often and be productive, I thought I'd share with you a story. A story of how I was raised and how I learned about society and how to act. Not through people, not through television, but through video games and the act of playing them. This is something I think about sometimes, but due to how personal it is to me, I don't feel a great need to share it, as it's not something I'm necessarily proud of, but it is true nonetheless. I, as an Aspergic, sheltered child, learn more about society and people and how to act, not from being around others, but rather sitting in my room all day and playing the likes of Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas and GTA 4. Yeah. To start, we have to go way back to my early childhood where I was a bit of a dumb, quiet kid, to say the least. I had my curiosities and I had my toys. I enjoyed playing army men with my various action figures and tanks, pretending to play Modern Warfare with the action figures I respectively called Captain Price, Soap and Makarov, but for the most part, I didn't do a lot. However, one thing I did have for me as I grew up and got a bit older were my video games. It's funny because as a child I was always ashamed about how much I enjoyed playing video games. I could never properly vocalize my love for them, as I feared being seen as less for enjoying such things. I remember the first video game I ever played was at the age of 3. I was rummaging through my dad's stuff, as you do during childhood, and I found his Nintendo 64. With this N64, he had a copy of GoldenEye. And so, for about a week, I pestered my parents into finding the wires for it so I could play it. With this, I found what was certainly one of the most surreal experiences I had as a child. A functioning Nintendo 64 with a game I could directly control with my own 2 hands. It was like watching an interactive movie, only I was the main protagonist. I loved it, and within a year I had obtained my very own video games console all for myself. For my birthday. One day, my dad came home from work, sat me up on the washing machine, and handed me my very own Nintendo DS at the age of 4. It had a copy of Super Mario Bros. And I played it to my heart's content for days on end. Cut a few years ahead, and I had my very own PlayStation 2, a hand-me-down from my dad, but one I appreciated the hell out of nonetheless. I was always a generation behind gaming-wise, having had the PlayStation 2 at the time of the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, and then having the Xbox 360 when the Xbox One came out. Then, I had the Xbox One for a short while before the release of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. Great naming scheme there, Microsoft. Microsoft cock. Just a side note about the Xbox One for a second. It was crap. Like, what a truly crap gaming console. I only had it for a couple of years before it became a glorified YouTube machine, and I decided to sell it to buy parts for my computer. I think I played a Dead Rising 3, Watch Dogs 1 and Sunset Overdrive on my Xbox before realising there was basically fuck all else to play that didn't cost €60 I didn't have. So, upon getting sick of it, I went back to my old PlayStation 2 and my Xbox 360 where I had an ocean of cheap and brilliant games to play. Nonetheless, as a child, I very much loved gaming. Some of my favourite games were the games I wasn't allowed to have. I distinctly remember having a copy of Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories for the PSP lent to me by my friend Alex. I hid it under a teddy bear in my mother's room. And then one day I lost it and never gave it back to him. Sorry, Alex. But I played a lot of Grand Theft Auto as a kid. I would frequently go over to my friend Alex's house to play GTA 4 with him on his Xbox 360. We would take turns stealing cars, crashing cars, killing prostitutes, and inevitably dying to the hands of police brutality. We would take turns passing the controller from one to another every time we died, and this could go on for hours. One of us would backseat game while the other played. Great times. I would eventually get my hands on some of the old PlayStation 2 Grand Theft Autos through secondhand shops and charity shops where they sell old video games for cheap. And let me restate here, I was a completely socially inept kid who did not understand his own emotions or how to regulate them in the slightest. I had problems talking to people. I could never look people in the eyes. I had I had great problems talking to people for most of my childhood because I was sheltered for most of my childhood. So I did not have very many friends, and I was considered an outcast at my school, a weird kid. Only really able to hang out with the other weird kids and the nerds, you know? But that was fine. Most kids are arseholes anyway, and I am lucky to still keep in contact with a number of my childhood friends. With that said, getting my hands on a Grand Theft Auto game was a pretty big deal for me as a kid. I hid any games from the series I got from my parents, and I only played them at night behind their backs. I had plenty of fun playing in Liberty City through Liberty City Stories for PlayStation 2 and Los Santos in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I would eventually also get my hands on a copy of Grand Theft Auto 4 for Xbox 360, which for me was a game changer. For the first time, I was playing a game that truly felt realistic. Like, instead of a cartoony game, this was a portal into another world. A digital world, but a world nonetheless. One where people would react realistically in physical situations, where they would talk and actually mean the words they were saying. There was a physical and emotional depth to the people on screen, and it made me think so much differently of video games as a whole. Niko Bellic was a believable character whom you actually felt an emotional connection towards. He wasn't just a group of pixels on a screen. And for the first time as a kid, I really paid attention to something. To the way he talked, to the way he moved and carried himself. I was no longer just channeling myself through an interactive 3D model. I was playing a character and influencing him. And this got me thinking about the world he was in, the skewed satirical presentation of the USA in Grand Theft Auto. I would listen to the radio ads where everything was absurd, and I would listen to the character of Laszlo Jones speaking for hours on end. A lot of it I didn't even understand was supposed to be humorous. It was supposed to be satirical of real life, you know? With the likes of Laszlo Jones making fun of homeless people and having an intern called Jorge, which he referred to as Georgie. But still, I would listen to it a lot and I would just pay attention to the characters, and I feel like this is very heavily responsible for the sense of humor and the way I act today. I think it's very fair to say that I learned how to act like a human from playing those games, from observing the dialogue and paying attention to how the characters talk to each other, depending on the situation they were in and the power dynamics between them. For example, Roman Bellic, the beer-drinking, prostitute-loving, bowling aficionado himself. You could tell that when he met Niko, he was not okay, but he was just so happy to have a familiar face around, one he could trust. He lied to Niko about his life in Liberty City to convince Niko that it was worth moving to the USA. Before Niko moved to Liberty City, Roman was a sad and lonely middle-aged drunkard whose prospects in life weren't very big. In comes Niko, and Roman's life is completely changed. No longer is he alone, he now has somebody by his side who he can trust, but doesn't trust him due to all the lies about America and his personal life he proposed to Niko through his emails. There's some real depth to these characters, and they don't just exist as a means to an end, so the video game can throw cool action set pieces at your face and give you bad guys to shoot. These characters were really well written and fleshed out before they were ever implemented into the video game as a piece of code. What got me thinking about this was Rockstar's recent horrible ports of Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City and San Andreas to PC, Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, and never forget the Nintendo Switch port, which is truly god-awful. I was thinking to myself, Jesus, you know, how the mighty have fallen. And how, when I was growing up, I absolutely adored Rockstar and the games they made. I still remember the day Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. I had it pre-ordered from the money I saved up. I had the poster of Franklin and Chop on my door. And I remember coming home from school that day, when it came out, eager to play it, putting the disc into my Xbox 360 and putting the map of Los Santos on my wall. as I waited for the game to install to my hard drive. When it finally booted up, I was blown away. And I don't think I went to school the next day. I played the shit out of that game, and I spent so much time just admiring the detail of it, the world they built for us, and of course even more satirical presentations of America and the people in it. I truly adored that game. Little did I know it would be the last I'd see from Rockstar from the better part of a decade, not counting Red Dead Redemption 2. This was the first major Rockstar release in almost a decade, and wow, it's bad. It is truly the first genuinely bad thing Rockstar has released for full price, and it definitely has made me lose a lot of faith in their ability to make good games. I was hopeful that the likes of low-quality trash such as Grand Theft Auto Online would just be like a one-off sort of thing, and they'd get back to making good games eventually. Sadly, I have been proven wrong multiple times now. Putting aside the disastrous remaster of GTA San Andreas for Xbox 360 in 2014, which was just the mobile version of San Andreas fucking booted up to 1080p and like everybody got dipped in oil, Rockstar have done nothing but prove repeatedly that they are nothing but a shadow of their former selves, and it's quite sad. I miss when every time Rockstar released something, it was an event worth getting excited over. And I miss being able to look at the products they released and be proud to be a part of their respective communities, having been essentially raised by the Grand Theft Auto series of video games. Sure, I remember other video games having an influence on me growing up. Funny enough, an example I thought of the other day was how when I was a kid, I learned how to properly bathe myself through a mini game in a game called Custom Robo for the Nintendo DS. A niche RPG game where you built robots and you made them fight each other. When your robots got dirty, you'd have to clean them or they wouldn't perform as well. And when you cleaned them, you had to do each individual body part piece by piece. Starting with the head, going onto the arms and the torso, and then onto the legs. That was how I washed and dried myself when I was a kid, when I showered. But as far as communication and interacting with the world, I owe it almost entirely to Grand Theft Auto. No other game influenced my perception of the world quite as much as that game. Probably why I was such a piece of shite kid, you know? But if it weren't for that game, I can imagine myself remaining in that socially inept position, unable to talk to the people around me without being a weird wreck of a human. And just for the sake of answering the age-old question, no. Video games do not cause violence. Violent people cause violence. I grew up playing some of the nastiest shit. You don't think that within a year of having an internet connection, I didn't know what Postal and Manhunt were? I played some truly grim shit as a kid, and never once did that make me think, yeah, I sure do feel like committing some vehicular manslaughter today. That has and always will be a fallacy. Untrue. I was only ever violent when someone fucking deserved it. Funny story, I beat the masculinity so bad out of a kid in second year that he became a SoundCloud rapper. I wish I was joking. But that's a video for another time, folks. I hope you enjoyed this little foray into the mind of yours truly. I'm really starting to enjoy this video making process again. I'm going to try to get some stuff off the back burner. I have some old scripts I never did anything with. One's about Rocco's modern life and another is about the angry video game nerd, but that's a special one though, and that will require quite the extra bit of effort. So if any of that interests you, do subscribe, do the fucking bell notification thing that people do nowadays, and like the video. Sharing the links to my videos also helps me a lot in the algorithm, as me and YouTube don't tend to get along all that well. With that said, I hope you enjoyed and I hope to see you back soon. Go raibh maith agat, go to maith sé de hulle, and
I'd love to see him succeed in today's climate.